You're listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Now, it is time to break it down.
Welcome to episode number 44 of the Sonny Brown Breakdown. I'm your host, Sonny Brown, and in this episode, I talk to Richy Walsh. Now, Richy is a UFC veteran, he's a jiu-jitsu black belt, and he's currently working over at the UFC Performance Institute in Shanghai, China. Now, I've known Richy for many years, trained with him personally, so have a good couple of laughs during this interview, but I really wanted to focus in on the work he's doing at the UFC P.I. as an MMA coach, and in particular, some of the areas he's specialized in. Now, the UFC Performance Institute has recently released a research journal, and Richy had contributed some articles to that, and so one of the areas we get into is the aspects of mental training, which he has some great ideas about that, and also running sparring, fight camps, breaking down footage, which is something he does for the UFC. So I was interested to hear the professional take on that. And it's really fascinating and great stuff that he's doing over there. So we get a bit of a look about what the UFC's plans are for their Performance Institute in producing high-level athletes in China. So I hope you enjoy it. Now, I'd like to apologize for the break between the episodes. I'm hoping to get them out a bit quicker. In the meantime, I've actually upgraded my audio equipment. So I've still got some recorded with the old setup, but in the coming episodes, the audio quality should see a markable increase. And I'm also hoping that looking at hiring an editor, which is something I've been doing myself, but it'd be great to be able to just record, send them over, get them out. So I'm hoping to start a Patreon account, which I know a lot of people do. I've kind of been holding off to do it, but it would really help to be able to just get the episodes out quicker. So if you have any ideas on things I could do for the rewards, the subscriber benefits, send them through sonnybrown@gmail.com. That'd be great. And if just let me know if it's something you're interested in. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram, Sonny Brown Breakdown, or check out the website, sonnybrown.net. And now, without further ado, let's go to the podcast. G'day, Richy. How are you today, mate?
Not too bad, Sonny. Just chilling out here in Sydney.
Living the dream?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm back from China just for a few months, seeing the family, getting as much time in as I can, and then be heading back to Shanghai in a couple of weeks. So yeah, making the most of it, chilling out, not doing as much training as I'd like to, but eating and enjoying my time.
Mate, that's all the fun stuff, except for the lack of training. Can you just give us a brief introduction of yourself, just how you got into martial arts and then leading into the Ultimate Fighter in the UFC?
Oh, well, okay, I'll make it brief because that's what you asked. I guess I was, just like many young Australians, just playing the regular sports that we do here that are quite popular in mainstream, rugby and basketball, and was always into kind of competitive sports, and I kind of liked the feeling of being in the game, so to speak. And then I guess I was introduced to UFC at around 15, where I think there was just a UFC knockouts 1, 2, 3 that kind of got passed around amongst other things that got passed around when you were that age. And, that's when I first saw it. And I just went, this is it. This is like the pinnacle. Something about that gets me excited and gets my heart beating. I think deep down, I always knew that I wanted to fight, like I just wanted to be in that situation of, it was like a call. Fast forward a couple of years, I contacted, the Reznikov boys who own a gym, which was local at the time, VT1. And then I just contacted them, and I guess it organically just started like that. I started with jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, and then fast forward again, years later, a few fights, few fights later, and then it was the Ultimate Fighter, and fast forward again into my 30s, and working back with the UFC, not fighting for them, but working back with them as a coach. So that's a kind of expedited version of what happened. But more or less, I guess the introduction to the UFC was just seeing it on a video, Googling a place to train, and going and doing it myself, because I knew it was something that I was very, very interested in. And as I got into it, I set this goal. Okay, I want to be in the UFC. I want to be on the Ultimate Fighter. And I didn't want to stop until I'd done that. And almost from then to now, all I could focus on was just my career and my training and nothing else. And since I've stopped focusing just on my career and my training, it's almost hard to be motivated myself to even train. Now it's like, I feel like a regular layman, just training is a chore. Like, I got to get in the gym. I'm going to get fat. But that's how I feel with training, actually. The enjoyment for me is actually the obsession with something, you know, and now it's coaching. So I need to stay relevant and do a bit of martial arts. Obviously, when I'm back in China coaching, I get on the mats and I'm always, you know, have a touch point with what's going on in trends. But yeah, just hyper focused on one area. And before it was being an athlete, and now that it's being a coach, it's not being an athlete. And fitness, I've discovered that I'm not actually one of those people who just likes doing fitness for the point of it. I just, you know, I like the competitive side of something, you know?
Yeah, fair play to you.
Actually,
and
in a selfish way, and this is like, I think a lot of people get very altruistic when they're talking about the motives for why they do stuff. But for me, I guess a lot of it is selfish, right? It's like, I want to do it. You know, you might want to help people, you might want to hurt people, but you know, one's better than the other, obviously. But when I was fighting, I wanted to hurt people, but now I want to help people. But it's also because, you know, part of it's entwined in that ego and what you want to do and what your future looks like, right? And you hope that that's helping people on the way.
So now just helping people hurt people is where we're at.
That's the business we're in.
Yeah, it is the hurt business. And so you had, you know, time on the Ultimate Fighter, you know, fighting in the UFC, and I still, you know, got to give you props for that. You know, you fought on the, you know, sold out LA Staples Center card, you know, yeah. from a boy from the North Shore's got to be a big experience, North Shore of Sydney, of course. And after you left the UFC, you started coaching over in China at a gym over there, I do believe. And then that led to you getting a job with the UFC Performance Institute when they opened up their China spot, I guess. How did that all play out? And, you know, were you just kind of, you know, Johnny on the spot to find yourself?
Yeah. I guess there's two things there. Like, yes, I was in China, but no, I'd say, you know, and this is what would be my advice to my children or young children or whoever, you know, people who are pursuing a career and want to do something positive, is like, you know, shake hands, you know, make a smile, you know, get around, get around, so to speak, Sonny Brown style. But, you know, with a handshake and a smile got me a lot of places. Now, when I went to the US or I was training anywhere, I make an effort, and also because I like to make an effort to be friendly and keep in touch with people and those relationships. And actually, I didn't get the job because I was so much in China. That just happened to be coincidence, actually, because I went to China to coach originally, like you said, at another place. And I trained in the US in Sacramento with Team Alpha Male and Uriah, and he'd called me up like literally 2 months into going to China. I planned to go there for 3 to 6 months, just do a little stint of coaching. To be honest, I was a bit lost in my life. I'd finished fighting. It was I was definitely depressed, and I was coming back from that, which is something I'd never experienced. Now we're segueing onto something else. But anyway, Uriah, back to the point in your question, Uriah called me up and said, look, I've been working with the UFC on a contractual basis in terms of trying to get the coaching set up for the Performance Institute in Shanghai. And I'm working with Forrest Griffin and just bouncing some ideas of a coaching, staffing it basically. And he said, are you interested? I know you're in China and we've worked together before, and you've come to Sacramento and train, and I know you. Are you interested? I just want to put your name in the hat. And I said, yeah, tell me about the role. And we had an hour conversation, and it went no further for, several months. And then I got contacted by Peter Jung, who's actually, vice president director of, China and UFC, and he contacted me through Messenger on Facebook, just saying, hey, I'm reaching out on behalf of Forrest Griffin to try and contact you. I couldn't get you on other means, email, etc. So I said, oh, hey, yeah, sure. Like, here's my number, give me a call. Forrest gave me a call. Forrest ended up coming to China to see where they were building the facility. We met up. I coached him. I did some rounds with him wrestling. I took him down. He took me down, I think, maybe not. And we just kind of, we got our sweat on. We had a coffee. We had a good chat, and we got along. And he said, "Look, I'm looking for an assistant coach to the head coach, obviously, Dean, and I think you might be the guy. So let's stay in contact, and end up going to Las Vegas for the interview, and did a presentation there about my coaching philosophies and methodology and how I would structure a fight camp, and then I guess got the job, and since then been working there for over 2 years, working under Dean Amersinger, who's the head coach, learning a lot from him. He's obviously a wealth of knowledge. We've kind of got to the nitty gritty of MMA programming and periodization, which I wasn't obviously as up to date with as him, and I've learned a lot from him, particularly on that side of coaching. There's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of athletes who know how to show a technique and show several techniques or many techniques in an area, but they don't know how to structure the actual program and how to best fit a team trying to improve over the duration of years or months or whatever it is in those mesocycles, or in the lead up to a fight. There's a lot more going on than just showing good technique, right? It's showing good technique, getting your fighters through fight camp without getting injured, structuring their learning, structuring their training around the fight and fight week, etc. So there's a lot of things going on that I've learned, since retiring myself, that I didn't know as a fighter. That I think some of these guys are so lucky these days that they just walk into this sport where a lot of people have made inroads, particularly before our time even, and then our generation and the next, and it just keeps getting better and better. And obviously eventually this would be ancient history, what we're talking about.
I mean, maybe speaking of ancient history, China has a long, history with the martial arts, of course. And what is the actual, goals of the Performance Center over there that you're working to achieve? I mean, I know you basically are recruiting Chinese fighters to prepare them for the UFC. Is that?
Yeah, correct. I think that it's obviously there's the business side of it, and then there's what we're doing as coaches, and how I see us operating in China and from the coaching and the P.I. perspective is actually improving Chinese mixed martial arts, which is kind of ironic, in terms of they are the original, kung fu and martial arts, epicenter of the world. And now we're bringing back that, that kind of knowledge to China and upskilling them again, because I think on the coaches front, I mean, there's obviously great athletes there. There's the number of people, but in terms of what they're doing for training and just that MMA knowledge, we're there to kind of bring that skill set up. And we're also there to recruit fighters from the domestic scene, keep an eye on them, invite them in, combine them, test them, and give them spots, scholarship spots as an academy athlete. And once they're on our roster, then we will train them as if they are, our own fighter. They will sleep there, eat there, train all their sessions there. It's fully integrated training from strength and conditioning, dietetics, physiotherapy, to skills training. So everything under one roof. We have full control of their training camp, their workloads, and just improving them and bringing them to that level where they're ready to then make the jump to UFC. That's the plan, and that's what we've been doing. In terms of the business plan, of course, is China's such a big market, and there's over 1 billion people there. The MMA share of that sporting market was quite small, and there's an opportunity for the UFC to build, right? But to build in a country, it's twofold. You need to obviously promote the sport, but you need to have Chinese fighters that are of that standard. So that's where we come in the last point I just made. We come in, we build the standard up, UFC grows, it gets popular, gets notoriety, people watch it, they subscribe to it, they want to buy products or everything to do with UFC, and that's where it kind of stair-steps its way up. But in terms of in business, I mean, there's big deals going through now with China Mobile, and UFC is on the up in China. So, I mean, it's obviously working, and we're hoping just to ride that wave of interest in UFC, get more athletes through the doors, and away from, other sports and into MMA, basically.
So how about that? We got a multi-billion-dollar company trying to crack into, what would be obviously multi-billion-dollar market. And they're, one of the key figures at that is filthy Richy Walsh. How good is that?
Who knows what they're doing? I'm just like, guys, come on, come in. Here we go. No, there's definitely multiple things going on. Obviously, on our side, it's great because we have that kind of autonomy just to upskill the athletes, recruit them, get them in, do the best job we can. We're not pinched by bottom dollar. You know, we're not a gym where we have to keep the doors open because I need to get 10 guys up, you know, this week to sign up on a membership. No, we're just trying to do the best we can for the athletes. And irrespective of how much money they're making us right now, that's not the big picture thing. The big picture thing is building that Chinese talent up. So it's a great opportunity for me and the coaching staff. And I think it's a great opportunity for any young fighter. I mean, if I was 18, 19 years old and could, you know, get all my food paid for, good coaching, you know, top level, everything, I mean, geez, it would be a dream come true, right? We were just like kind of, I had the ass hanging out of me driving around in a 1.3 litre Toyota Starlet, which I used to cut weight in, and just driving around from session to session, shin guards and smelly shit all in the back, 40-degree days in Australia. It was just best times, right? But my car was just filthy, it's filthy shit box, going from session to session, fucking ringworm all over you. Who knows?
Was that just turn the heater up for the weight cutting?
Yeah, the weight cut. We're a little bit off, a few hundred grams, sweatsuits on, just blasted the heater in that car, all sat in there, hot boxed it.
Mate, that's the only way to do it sometimes. Yeah. Now, you mentioned there the Combine, which is something that you spoke to me before about, and it's very interesting. I've only heard it, you know, that word really used in reference to the NFL Combine, which is kind of like a tryout selection process. And I'm wondering if you can take me through, you know, what that's like for yourself in the, you know, at the UFC P.I. in China. What is the UFC Combine that they're doing?
The Combine is based loosely around, you know, the NFL, because they obviously bring potential, you know, college athletes in and take them through a battery of tests, similar to what we do. So we take them in through a battery of tests. You know, there's 11. They range from anthropomorphic, where we're just doing measurements of, you know, their length, you know, their reach, all this kind of stuff, height, etc. You know, body mass, all the way through to non-technical tests. You know, strength tests, for example, isometric mid-thigh pull, which is, if you've ever seen that set up on the floor on the force plates, you know, just their maximum kind of deadlift strength. You know, and we do grip strength. We do reactionary drills on the lights, punch throw. We're using measurements on that. We're using the counter movement jump, alactic and lactic tests. So we're doing thresholds and testing their limits. And then upstairs, we're doing a grappling test, and we're also doing a wrestling test and a striking test. So we're looking at the technical, non-technical, and then just anthropomorphics in those 11 tests. And we're just kind of getting a baseline on every athlete where their strengths and weaknesses lie. You know, for example, on the anthropomorphics, it could be just where they sit in that division. Are they tall for that division? What is their actual division, and what's their kind of body? You know, if you notice, a lot of good fighters have a long reach, you know, and amongst things, also big heads. But it's just all about collecting this data, aggregating this data, so we can start to see the trends, because nobody's been doing this. There's been people doing this in other sports for years. We want to have this data, so in 5 years or 3 years or 2 years, we can look back and go, actually, the best guys do have a reach that's, you know, unusually long. They're in this percentile of reach, or this is just kind of building that data. And the PI is a lot about building data so that we do have accurate data in years to come about all the divisions and all the weights. And then with the non-technical stuff, of course, we're just seeing their actual physical capabilities, and where they sit in that division, where they sit against the other people who are combining. And we continually test them. Every mesocycle, we will do a testing week. You know, so if we're doing a moderate, high, low week, we will test them in the low week, and just to keep a track of their constant progress on the gym floor. And then when I was talking about the technical tests, myself and Dean and the MMA coaches, jiu-jitsu coaches, we'll put them through a grappling test, where we're doing positional stuff. So more what we call isolated stuff, you know, so starting in side control, starting in mount, starting on the back, and run through positions, right? And in a rotation. So we just want to see them in those isolated positions, and we're going to be scoring them for submissions, scoring them for passes, sweeps, etc. Much like a jiu-jitsu competition, but we're just isolating the positions for the times. So that gives us, like, you know, a good, you know, spider kind of graph of where their strengths and weaknesses are in grappling. Of course, you know, we're all constantly trying to improve the tests, and nothing's going to be perfect, right? Because it's just a snapshot of what they're doing. Then we have the wrestling test, which is upstairs. So we kind of set we just want to see, their variety of takedowns, their technical execution of takedowns, and some parts, how many they can do in that as against a metric. But this time we actually added in the Combine, we added in some wall work. So they'd be doing takedowns in the open, for 1 minute. Then we did punches into takedowns, and we did, against the wall underhook, against the wall doubles, against the wall singles. So we want to see that mix of MMA, because again, getting your mind away from too much of the isolated arts and more into the transitional, sections, which is where most of the good fighters are good, right? They're good in those transitional sections of MMA, either coming out of the clinch into striking, from top position to ground and pound striking, whatever it is, it's usually in between the ranges. So that's something we've tried to incorporate since day dot, but improve over the duration of the Combine. So we've had each Combine trying to improve what we're doing in terms of testing. But basically, in a nutshell, the Combine is based loosely off the the NFL Combine, where we're bringing a batch of athletes that we recruit in. We see them in the domestic scene. We bring them in, invite them in, ask them to try out, do physical, non-technical, technical, and anthropomorphic tests. Have a running scoreboard that's live, and basically somebody wins the Combine, but just trying to keep that competition going of where they can see themselves up on the scoreboard and where they are. That's more for them, but for us is just, it gives us a good look at their strengths and weaknesses all round. And if it comes down to, say, we're only selecting 10 and there's 30 trying out, then if we're kind of unsure about a couple, we can compare all their strengths and weaknesses and go, okay, we want this guy, because we don't have a budget that just goes on forever. We can't have hundreds of people in there, but if it comes close to selecting between two, this Combine, it could be, hey, they're identical, but this guy's reach is 6 inches longer. Well, or they're identical, but hey, this guy's punch throw is massive. He's got big power. We can get that power. We can train it. Like, it depends what we can do with them, right? So they're all factors that come into it.
Sounds like you are at the forefront quite seriously then of this technical evolution of MMA evolving into more of a well-refined, established sport. And so you're just you're selecting those fighters from the local China regional circuit. Are you out there just keeping, watching the shows, you talent scout?
For sure. We have a guy, Peter Jung, who I was talking about before, who does the commentary over there for the UFC, and amongst things, he works at the UFC office as well. He's constantly keeping tabs on the local events, whether it's Wulingfeng, which is Wars, a big promotion there, or it could be WKG or whatever. And we know most of the fighters who are in those promotions, and anybody that's got a record of some merit, whether it be 3 wins in a row, or they've got over 10 fights or 5 fights, we'll be keeping tabs, and we'll have a list of potentials, and then we'll go through that list. Myself, Forrest, Dean, we'll watch all their fights, and we'll see who we like, who we don't like, and invite those that kind of cohort to the Combine and invite them to try out. That's how it works in basics. There's no better way, really, I think, to do it at the moment than just look at the grassroots, or look at the scene that's happening, spot some people you like, investigate further into their tapology or Sherdog, make sure they've had enough experience, invite them in, take a good thorough look at them, then offer them an opportunity, or maybe say come back in 6 months. So that's how we're doing it at the moment until there's a better way to do it. But yeah.
So are you then, it's kind of like the golden ticket for these guys maybe. So are you then, making or breaking hearts when you come down to the final decision?
Yeah, for sure. We sit them all down. They make a show of it. There's a production of it, right? Actually, there's on the I don't know if you've seen on Fight Pass, there's like a couple of episodes up maybe already of the UFC Shanghai Combine. You can have a good look at it. But yeah, there's obviously a bit of drama around it when they're recording it. So they like to sit everybody in the theater at the end, and on the screen it's who gets selected. So it is that format. There's a bit of pressure behind it, and I think that's good as well, creating a little bit of competitive pressure, because you want to see how people kind of rise to the occasion, or do they kind of crumble and fall away a little bit, and that can be indicative of what you're working with in the future. Because as I've discovered, coaching, and people will like to tell you that it's their coaching, but it's more about getting out of the way of good fighters and keeping them on the track of the kind of projection of getting the most out of what they want to do, rather than trying to infiltrate that too much and get in their way. And some people just have it. You know, you can see someone who's very, very skilled in the gym, but you know that there's just that little thing. You look at them and they're kind of like staring into the space, or they're not quite there. They're mentally, you know, they're a little bit like, it's so hard to get over that. And you can still get those people to a higher level. You know, they're thinkers, right? I'm one of those people, but you want the person who just has the aptitude naturally, mentally. And I think obviously you need to be physical if you're fighting. You need to have skills. You need to be fast or strong or whatever it is. You need skills. That's a requirement. But this is a requirement, I think, to be in that real top echelon of fighting. You need to have that. And I think a lot of it is, some is learned, but a lot of the skills that we're talking about, it's like no different to fashion models. You're born with those genetics. And it's not a sport. It's modeling, right? But you're born with those genetics. You look up to them like, oh my God, she's so beautiful. She's beautiful. I mean, she's just born like that. Doesn't eat. But then MMA fighters, I wonder how much of that is they're actually just born with it. Yeah, of course, there's a skill. We're learning a skill. It's different. We're not just walking down a catwalk. But I think a lot of it is actually just skill, you know, is skill. A lot of it is that, you know, inherent kind of mental toughness and physical abilities that you're born with, and then added on to having some sort of OCD or a little bit hyper focused on something, and then you have a good coach steering you in the right direction, you know, to keep the wheels on the track. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I think sometimes a lot of coaching can be about just making sure the athlete makes it to the cage uninjured. That can be just just as important as some of the other factors. And in terms of the mental skills, so the UFC Performance Institute has released 2 journals, or with research journals, basically, with a bunch of different articles and research that they've done. They're putting it out there for the public to view, which is an excellent resource, both these ones. And in the second one, you have had a hand in some of those articles as well. And speaking of mental skills, I mean, one of the ones that you've worked on is mental skills and preparedness. And so I'm wondering, is there, what kind of things are you've kind of addressed what you're looking at, but what kind of steps are you taking then for those athletes to prepare them for competition?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that we do is, I mean, in terms of mental preparedness, I'd say that's the biggest and the weakest link in MMA coaching, or athletes to kind of getting on board on this, I think. And it was something that I was gravitating towards, the end of my career. I was using a sports psychologist, but, I made a few mistakes. I engaged with somebody who was like an NLP guy, and that wasn't for me. It was cheesy and I didn't buy it. And then I was actually with a proper sports psychologist, and he was good. And then you just start kind of getting in your own head. So I think you don't need a sports psychologist. You don't need a psychologist. But what you need to do is, as an athlete, is, and this is we're in the early stages, so this is me just spitballing ideas. Mm-hmm. So because there's a table in there. I mean, I don't know if it's in there now, but there's a table in there that is like, my idea was periodizing mental skills training. That was an idea that I had over a fight camp duration. So we periodize everything else. So why wouldn't we periodize skills training? Building up on, for example, if we're in off camp and we're learning a isolated martial art technique, so we're learning a wrestling takedown in off camp general prep. We're learning the single leg, and we're learning how to grip and pull in, and step to the outside and use my shoulder to take down. I'm going through all that process. In that stage of really isolating it, I could use visualization of me doing that technique that I learned that day. That would be an example of using visualization in that stage of the camp. And then when we move to the next mesocycle, say in the next 3 weeks of specific prep, I'm going for a single leg. Oh, the guy defends. I switch it to a double leg. So now it's giving specific situations to that single leg. I'm not focusing so much on my grip, my gable grip, where I put my pressure, where I put my footwork. No, I'm focusing on the reactions that somebody could give me in my skill acquisition, right? And then if I did from there want to do some visualization, this is just now ideas, I'd be visualizing me doing that single leg in a specific situation. The guy reacts and I finish, for example, right? Now, then if that was fight camp, I'd be visualizing me doing that against my opponent in a fight. So that would be the progression of, the single leg, or the visualization for such. The single leg that's not the point, but the point is that, you can kind of move in a linear pattern that way. That was an idea that I just had for visualization, but it could be video analysis. That you could be watching video analysis is visualization, or video analysis. You're watching video analysis of the single leg isolated and you training it in specific prep. You're watching you in rounds trying to do it and trying to link it together. And then in the fight camp, you're watching your opponent and you're watching yourself move, and then it becomes more focused on that. So that would be the progression of video analysis. And so I just had this idea of, can you plan it in a fight camp? But the thing is like this, with mental skills preparation, I don't think everybody needs, this umbrella of things. I think how I would see it is there's a toolbox of things you can use, whether it be visualization, mindfulness, proprioception, things that you can use, right? You don't have to speak to a psychologist, but these things you can use in a toolbox. And as an individual, you've got to assess, what you think you need to take and put into your training regime, because a lot of this stuff is athlete buy-in. Mm-hmm. I can tell you something like, if I can drink a kale juice every day and get a coffee enema, but maybe you're not going to buy into that and do yoga,
Yeah, I don't like kale, so,
Yeah. So I think a big part of like coaching anybody, especially a team, is like, rather than just like jamming stuff down the throat and telling them what to do, is like, these are the things you can do, these tools that you can use. You're like, stop talking.
No, go on.
Yeah, I'm laughing at the same thing as you. But pick something you use and periodize that in your camp. So that's something I've been thinking about. But back to my point is, it's underutilized mental skills. I think it's very seldom do people use it. And if they do, it's like a sports psychologist or an NLP, and it's kind of like, not their head coach engaging it. And that's like when we were writing this chapter, we were trying to like, put our heads together about this, because this is something that is just like nobody's got any like real solid literature in MMA about, and no one's really been doing much. I mean, I'm sure there's individual coaches in gyms who are, but yeah, it's just something that there wasn't an awful amount about. And I think, stuff like mindfulness and just being grounded and learning to switch on and off are the big things, because as fighters, we're always on. You're in the car, you're thinking about fighting, you're listening to AC/DC in the car and you're just punching the steering wheel. I don't know what, but these are the things that are just like you're getting an adrenal fatigue almost, and you kind of like you're too aroused. If I'm going to speak to it, your arousal level is too high, and you're just kind of burning the candle on both ends, and then that fucks your diet up and fucks your hormones up, and you just get other problems. So you got to know when to switch on and when to switch off. The same goes for preparation in mental skills, in terms of just like, for example, like in off camp, we're not getting to that state of arousal where we're in fight camp, maybe the couple of weeks before, we got walkout music, lights on, we're getting fucking G'd up. The sparring level's higher. So the things are higher, but you can't maintain that for a long period of time. So there's a lot of considerations. I think I'm kind of speaking here, but there's a lot of considerations about mental stuff. And perhaps you'd have to do an objective analysis on your fighter in your gym and see where their strengths and weaknesses lie on a mental or on a physical level, and then see what best fits in their training plan. You might have someone who's just a brick, and it doesn't matter what you say or do. They don't give a shit. They'll just go fight. They don't care. Okay, well, we don't need to focus our time on mindfulness and all this other crap and your yoga and your coffee enemas. We just need to focus. We just need to focus on getting you through the fight camp. Maybe it's injury prevention. Maybe it's getting you to every session. Because you're fucking always late. So this is where that you objectively try and look at the person, but then there has to be the subjectivity of what best fits each individual. So
I think that's brilliant, because, and the idea of periodizing mental training, I think is a great one too, because even I remember myself thinking about like visualizing things, and then when you would visualize things going wrong and how you're going to react to them, it's kind of like, well, you need to do that, but then, am I being too negative by thinking, should I just visualize myself, winning all the time? And, I don't want to visualize what happens if something goes wrong. So I think for someone like myself, at least, that the idea of, periodizing that and being like, no, it's not that time yet to visualize what happens when things go wrong could be a help.
Yeah. You start getting negative imagery and positive imagery, whatever, and you kind of second guessing yourself. Even just like if you program it, you just set aside, like we set aside 2 times a week where you think for 30 minutes all the good and bad things that come into your head and out of your head, because it's going to happen. It doesn't matter if you're the best. I think you're still going to have a moment where you're like, fuck man, I could be knocked out and embarrassed. That thought's going to pop into your head because it could happen. So you'd be stupid not to think it. It's like, if I'm doing something dangerous, I want to know what the consequences are, in my head. I don't want to just be completely ignorant, because I want to be prepared. So those thoughts are going to happen. So let's give them a period, or let's give them a time, and set aside a time where you can have those thoughts, good and bad. And then the rest of the day, we're not having those background noises. So even it's difficult as well. As a fighter, it's a difficult thing to do, sit down and quiet and just let those thoughts come out. That's hard, man. That's hard. So programming that, I think, is the next level. And I think if I only coached 1 or 2 fighters, and you could really knuckle down on those kind of things, and if need be, right? Obviously, there's a needs analysis with what your fighters need, but you could do that. But when you got a crew of 50 people, I think the biggest beneficial things are like breathing. After some sessions, we try to bring them down from that state of arousal and from being G'd up, basically, through breathing. We'll bring their nervous system and relax them and bring their energy back down so they can start that recovery process. Because I think, as being constantly G'd up doesn't help your recovery, and it doesn't help your appetite. So things like breathing, just recovery modalities, ice baths, whether it be sauna, all that kind of stuff, I think is actually good mental training. That's why a lot of people run, and they do jogging, and I don't think it necessarily transfers in a great deal to the fighting, but it's the rhythm, it's the time of just mindfulness, just being in your own thoughts and just going through that rhythm. So there's many things, right? There's many avenues that people can go down, and fighters can use for mental training and mental preparedness. It doesn't have to be sitting in a room with a quack talking about your darkest, deepest secrets and what you do on things. It can be as simple as, jogging, visualization, video analysis, all of that stuff. There's a big, like I said, toolbox, and I think people need to know what they are, and they need to pick what's going to work for them and try things out.
So then, when you're evaluating the fighters in terms of their mental skills, are you giving them any questionnaires or surveys or things like that, or are you just just having a chat and gauging it off that?
This is actually my idea: is to create a mental preparedness, like this, a survey, just to see as an analysis to needs. But in terms of, have we been doing this? No, I haven't been doing this to date. This is something that I'd like to incorporate in the training. I think as it is, from where we are in the P.I, from where we started, it's just been getting those systems in place, like on the training front, the staffing, the physio, the sports science, everything like that. These things don't just happen overnight, right? You might think, even if you're doing the best job in the world, things are constantly evolving, and that's where we're kind of getting to, like now, tightening the screws on things, but also getting to things like this, like where can we improve on? Where can we be world class and, best in class, and trying to create new and different ways to do it, right? Without just like getting testing fatigue and fatigue of giving your athletes too much shit to do, You don't necessarily want to be like, we're doing the best practice, but then you're training them and you're giving them fucking quizzes and you're giving them this and you're making them do all this recovery, and they're doing all this shit they don't want to do, that they can't see the link to what their actual sport is, because it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't work for everybody, and everybody's different. So we don't want to bamboozle them with too much stuff at once. And I think it's the best way is get them in the system, get them comfortable with what we're doing, and then slowly start to integrate things that are going to help. And if they don't help, we get rid of them. And if they do help, we keep them in. That's the beauty, right? We're not selling it. It's Richy Walsh's mental fitness workshop.
Oh, geez, that'd get the athletes motivated, wouldn't it? I could just hear the groan.
Here's a stick. Hit me.
Oh no, that's brilliant, mate. This really is. And
I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's still in the infancy in terms of like actually having a developed system around that, and it's very individualized and subjective because there's a language barrier with the Chinese athletes and getting inside their head, and a lot of face value stuff there, so it's hard to really assess those kind of things, whereas it's very much more transparent with, in a Western setting where people will tell you like, oh, I'm struggling with this, man. I'm having bad thoughts about getting knocked out every 2 minutes. Okay, let's do something about that. So we're still getting that rapport and getting that communication channels open before I think we can really settle on that.
Fair enough. And basically what I'm hearing is UFC P.I journal number 3. I'm going to be seeing Richy Walsh's mental preparedness questionnaire in there. Um, so one of the other things you mentioned, and one I might be a bit partial to myself, is the old video analysis. And that was another section you've got in the UFC journal, which is on competition and fighter analysis. And speaking to you, like, now part of your role as a professional is tape study. Can you take me through what that's like and how you use it? And if there's any job openings, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, I think you probably know what it's like watching tape. It's like you can't just watch it once and be abreast of how the opponent and the athlete are fighting, or A or B. Sometimes I think you've just got to obviously you've got to know what you're looking for, but a lot of people do. You can sit down and just watch. I like to sit down and watch the fights a few times through, because sometimes even when you watch a UFC fight, you'll notice you have a tendency to focus on one fighter that you like watching, and then things start to look good because I'm watching this one guy that I want to win, or I'm watching the other guy. It's like very rarely are you objectively just kind of watching the fight. You're kind of focusing on, I like the way he moves, and then, that's nice footwork. And you get kind of caught into just watching one person. So it's almost like when I'm watching the fights and I'm not going into, I don't have like a crazy computer breakdown of the fights. I mean, you probably do a better job than I do in terms of breaking down the fights. But for the academy athletes, they'll be fighting on the domestic show or UFC or whatever it is. I'll get an opponent name. I'll get his last 3, 4, 5 fights, but particularly those last 3, watch them a few times, just get to know how he moves in general, stance. Is he orthodox? Does he switch? Just get a feel for it. And then I'll go through and write some notes on the opponent that are specific, specific tells, traits, like you said, like I said, sorry, stance. Does he switch stance? Does he cut the ring? Does he not? So just kind of building up those things and taking notes on the opponent. And because the reason I'm not going to go like absolutely ham on this is because we might have 10 fighters fighting on a weekend. So I've got to watch 30 fights or maybe 40 fights of video analysis. And then from those 40 fights, I might have to watch them twice. I might have to watch them more than that. So I might have to watch, 50, 60. So it gets a little bit convoluted in terms of, doing a real beautiful breakdown on each person. But I like to do the tendencies of the opponent, keys to victory for our guys. And then we want to work that game plan within the 3 weeks before the fight, because we're doing 6-week fight camps. Opponents change a lot on the domestic scene. So putting a lot of time into game planning for things that are going to change is another thing. And then game planning too early for somebody is another trap, I think. I think everybody has their own A game. So working our fighters or our athletes' A game and always having that as the forefront. Because I think if you're focusing on the opponent, of course, you're mentally training yourself to focus on their movement and what they're going to be doing. And if they don't do it, suddenly you build this expectation of what they're going to do, and it's not what you want. What you want is how you're going to win the fight and how you're going to be fighting and how you're moving. And then added to that, knowing how the opponent's going to move and his traits and tendencies and how to trap him and the do's and do nots in certain situations, right, where their strengths and weaknesses lie, etc. So that's probably in a nutshell how I would break it down. I'd clip some things that they do that are common. We might, for example, if the person's a wrestler and they like double underhooks a lot, okay, working on not letting them get their hands together, shutting that down, setting up some drills that are based around that game plan, anti-wrestling, etc. So just very basic stuff. I mean, similar to probably what you're familiar with anyway. Tell me any differently. And that's what I do. But I mean, if it was a UFC fight, I mean, then we could look at the statistics. We could look at what's going on, where they spend most of their time, the percentage of takedowns they land, what they go for. We can start to actually use some stats, right? Because they're available. It's a little bit harder on the domestic shows. That added to, that's going to be objective, added to the subjective, my eye, taking notes, watching the fight through 3 or 4 times before you start taking notes on the guy himself or the girl, and then collating that into just some fast points. Then it can be translated by Eddie, who's one of the jiu-jitsu coaches. And then we can give it to them, I just give before the fight week. It's a templated sheet. It has the keys to victory, opponent notes, how they like their hands wrapped, what kind of gauze thickness they want, etc. Like all the notes about our fighter, our athlete. So I can just pull that up. So if we're wrapping 10 hands or 8 hands, I can just pull up this sheet and be like, okay, Yija, okay, he likes his left thumb wrap, but not his right thumb. He likes it thick gauze. Okay, cool. Okay, and then it'll be his game plan on there for him. We can send that to them as a PDF, whatever. So they're just getting those little touches. It's far from perfect, but I think it's the best that I've seen done in a team level in terms of MMA, right? So that's what we're kind of aiming towards. But in terms of your question about game planning, yeah, just watching the tape, clipping it, looking at the opponent's strengths and weaknesses, common traits, common tells, where they are, and what my opponent's game plan is. Keys to victory, path of least resistance, where they need to be and what they need to improve on, and we can do some drills around that. But I don't want to focus too much whenever I'm coaching, like this is what the guy does, this is what the guy does, this is what the guy does, because people have done it to me, and I end up in the situation what the guy wanted to do, thinking about what the guy does. So I'm just like, okay, incorporate into the game plan so that they know where they should be and shouldn't be without stressing them out too much, basically.
Yeah, I get that completely. It's like, if you've I would generally just ask guys, how do you see yourself winning? And like, that's the first game plan, whatever they come back, and then start building around that. Cause I think it's just that's important.
A great point. That's the first, that's like, so that is actually the first thing we would do is like, I would look at a game plan myself, like, and write some notes on the person. But of course we will ask the fighter. For example, we had a couple of guys fight recently, and we just said, look, how do you've watched the fight? Because a lot of guys or a lot of fighters or girls will like to watch the opponent, or they'll know the opponent they're fighting. So it's always a good question to ask them, like, how do you want to fight? And if they want to be specific to the person they're fighting, or just specific to what they want to do, right? They might just go, I just want to stand and strike because I think I'm going to beat this person. Okay. You don't want to start fucking with their psyche, do you?
Mm. And do they also have the habit of looking them up on the whatever the Chinese social media, the moment you give them a name, and they're
yeah, I think, and they always send me videos like, coach, these are the 4 videos of the guy. Okay. Good, man. They're pretty into it. It's the same worldwide, right? You get an opponent and then suddenly it's on.
Yeah. Been happening a lot recently.
I don't miss those moments of being like overly anxious for it sounds silly. Whenever you're not fighting and you're like where we are now, you're like, I'd take anyone. I'd take anyone. I'm not worried about anything. But then as soon as you're like back in a competition setting and you have an opponent, you start getting worried. You're like, I'm human.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd be doing the same probably too. And I think the crazy thing is now is there generally is so much information that people can look up on their own or just on someone, and they're looking at all the old training pics and stuff they got and everything. And it's like, oh, geez, it's too much. Do you actually then, once you've done the analysis, do you show clips that you've made to your fighters, or how does that work?
Yeah, it would depend, I think, on how receptive they are, because we'll ask them, just like you said, we'll ask them, how do you see yourself winning this fight, or what do you want to do first? And then do you want to watch the opponent fights together? Do you want to go through a breakdown of it? Some people are really, really keen to watch the opponent fights and sit down with you and know exactly how they're going to move. And other people don't want to watch them at all. They just want you to do their game planning and tell them what to do and not to do. So I think, yeah, that's pretty subjective. And because we have a big group, you just want to know, are they going to be watching the fights? Do they want you to watch the fights for them? Do they want to watch them with you? So that's definitely a question we'll ask first.
And then another thing that you had a role in with the UFC Journal is the sparring sections of just how you would, run sparring sessions. And I mean, that's obviously always a big debate in MMA about, technical sparring versus hard sparring versus just how hard sparring should be. What are your thoughts on that, and what are you working on with that at the moment?
Well, I think, a lot of that is obviously the table that's in there, and having levels of sparring is definitely Dean's inspiration. But I agree with that methodology in terms of having levels of sparring, so agreed upon levels. So it's very clear. Obviously, it's a little bit ambiguous between certain levels, right? They're quite close, but knowing that hard spar is 5 and touch sparring is 1 or whatever it is. And knowing where we should be in certain periods of camp. For example, a lot of MMA gyms will spar hard all the time. And I just don't think that is a good idea for A, for your health, B, for improving and not being chinny, and also, for C, for just trying things out, like, and having that confidence to go for new positions and moves. So if we look at off camp in two parts, obviously we have in there general prep and specific prep, and we just do 3-week mesocycles, 3 weeks, 3 weeks. So it goes off camp, general prep, specific prep, back to general prep, specific prep, till you get a fight camp, and we run a 6-week fight camp, and then you just go and fight camp. Okay, right? So if you're in off camp, you're trying to, what I was writing there was the focus is learning versus winning. Okay, it's not winning versus learning like fight camp. That's where I see the shift. So in off camp, you're trying to learn, and being conducive to learning would be not sparring at level 5, would be sparring at level 2 or 3, or touch sparring if at certain points. So you can have the confidence to try new moves. We're not using elbows and knees unless they're just touch. Maybe we're just keeping it real light, right? So it's safe. That gives people the incentive to try new things, like I said, without being hurt. And that's how you can improve. I think if you're in a constant state of playing your A game, you don't have that flair to just try things out and relax, switch stance, get hit a bit, know that I'm not going to get knocked out. That's massive. That's a massive, massive thing to have levels of sparring and monitor that, because A, for a safety reason, and B, for just technically improving people. And when it comes to fight camp, it does shift from a more competitive mindset and a more of a focus on winning as opposed to learning. So then you can up the sparring and have a peak of sparring at week 3 or 4 of that 6-week fight camp, and then taper it down for the last 10 days, And then the last one, I will start to use things in fight camp, like pre-framing, I will use in fight camp. So in the last week, for example, opponent A is fighting in the UFC. I will tell his sparring partners, hey, act like this. This is how his opponent moves. And it's the last week. Let's build him up a bit. Let's be up there, but let's be below him. So this is pre-framing, and these are important things in sparring. You don't want them to blast the hell out of him in the last week, and some people do. So there's a few things going on there. There's like pre-framing throughout fight camp, where I'll be telling training partners to act a specific way and try to mimic or replicate that person's opponent. Then there's pre-framing in terms of just the level of sparring at certain times. But the main point is, sparring levels, they need to be, for sure, they need to be there for a safety reason and for an improvement reason, like they're just, I'm just going to start repeating myself if we keep going. Like I've said 50 words, I don't have any more.
That's all right. But getting people to switch between those modes and that kind of, a nuanced change of power and training style is always difficult when dealing with fighters and athletes, and it's like, oh nah, he hit me a bit harder, I'm going to hit him back, and then that just escalates until all of a sudden there's a real fight in the gym, and then it's a strange moment when it switches to a real fight too. Have you been dealing with those same problems with people there?
Always. It's always, and that's why you need people on the mats, particularly when you have 50 people sparring. We need coaches there. I need to be like, sometimes I'm like, hey, bring it down, because what it's like. You see some guy hit someone a little bit hard. Maybe the guy moved into it. He slipped into the shot, and that guy's eyes light up. Then he goes a bit hard, and then suddenly you're just like, till they're just there swinging, like trying to knock each other's heads off like piñata. So sometimes I'll have to step in and say, hey, bring it down. Bring it down, and they usually do. They're pretty receptive of that. MMA, you get a bit of ego involved, and someone hits you, you hit them back. It's just like this stupid thing where someone leg kicks someone and then you leg kick them back, and you're like, that's a trap. It's like you can use those things. You can use those subtle things. If I kick someone's leg real hard, they're going to try to kick your leg real hard back. So it's like, I know that I can set things up on it, but people still do it even at a high level. But back to the sparring, I just think that's massive. You see people who just, it's great for you to spar hard all the time if you're the best guy there and you just beat everyone up because you become super confident, like the alpha. But it's terrible if you want to build a team of successful, healthy fighters.
Yeah. That is amazing, that the leg kick thing. I was actually telling that to someone just last night, of just how common it is. And
done it, like being involved in that, you see it now and you're like, God damn it, it's just the evolution, like some people are just doing things now. I'm like, wow, they're just mixing so many things up. And if you could get on, there's people that do that, they know that they set traps. knowing that someone's going to reply a certain way, and then of course they're moving to the next thing.
Yeah. So, well, I guess then moving on with, in terms of those setting traps, in terms of what you've put out in the performance journal, do you have like, the secret, bag of techniques that the UFC P.I guys are working on that they haven't put out, that they're keeping, and is it kind of categorized and systematized in the same way as some of these, articles in the performance journal?
Yeah, for sure. It is systematized in a similar fashion. Like every session is planned for every cycle, ahead of time. And there's themes, we have themes each week in terms of the wrestling. Like it's all based off a theme. And that theme is within a bigger theme, if you like, for the cycle. So, yeah, I mean, it's not crazy. What we're doing is not crazy. Single leg's still a single leg. Cage work's still cage work. It's or fence work. I think where people fall down is not in, like I said before, not in the techniques that you're doing. It's just in the execution of the program. And I think that having the correct training partners, the right resistance, the correct techniques, and structuring it in a good program is what makes for the successful fighters. And I think there's many people, like I said before, that know enough techniques and know the right amount of stuff. It's just executing it and following through with the consistency and building upon that in some sort of a program. So many good coaches just kind of like rock in one week and choose a technique and then go from there to there to there to there to there to there. But even if you can just structure it in, I mean, this is general population, that doesn't matter, right? But if it's for fighters, I think you got to have some sort of short-term and long-term goals of where you're going in terms of programming. And there's just certain core elements in MMA that need to be addressed and people need to have a base understanding of to even be in the UFC, right? So when I say syllabus, and you said, it's like systematized, it's not secret sauce. It's just like you need to know certain things. You need to know how to defend and offensive and defensive from a high underhook position against the fence. You need to know how to do defense and offense from a double leg position, a single leg position, a body lock position. You need to know now from exit, from off the cage, from 2 meters or a meter off, how you defend those takedowns or how you do those takedowns and set those strikes up. And then there's the nuance involved in the timing, the feints, the fakes, the level change, the head movement. That's all stuff that you add on, but the core techniques are there. And like I said, the main thing with programming is that general prep will introduce a new technique or a new style of technique and really hone in on the skills of it for 3 weeks. And then in that section as well, in the general prep, off-camp general prep, it'll be more isolated martial arts. So we still do like jiu-jitsu rounds. We still do wrestling rounds. We still do, whatever it is, boxing rounds. And then we're learning the technique and the real basic. And then specific preparation, we're learning the nuance and the why and the how you incorporate that. If they defend one way, you do something else. But in specific prep, we're starting to add in, ground and pound rounds instead of jiu-jitsu, with light strikes and small gloves. We're starting to add in clinch rounds or kickboxing or shoot boxing with clinch and takedown rounds. So it becomes more specific to learning the individual technique and then learning it in that situation. And then in fight camp, it's more focused around just MMA, like full integration, right? This is in the sparring instance, for example. And yeah, I mean, they're the main things. I guess to answer your question, no, I don't do or teach anything, I think, particularly that is totally left field that people haven't seen. It's just more that how we run the program and the consistency that we can have because of having everyone under one roof and having the opportunity to just run the course of the syllabus over and over again, in those cycles.
Beautiful. I mean, you say you don't have any secret techniques, mate, but I think I've seen a few on the mats,
Have you seen me move, mate, anymore? I really know the techniques. I'm like, guys, throw a right cross and a left hook.
Finishing up, Richy, where do you see, what's next on the horizon then for you with the UFC P.I? You said you're heading back over there, and where do you see yourself going with it?
Yeah, well, I think to answer your question, I'm going back over in a couple of weeks. I'll be continuing on working with the team as I was beforehand. Yeah, where do I see myself going? I mean, it's a good question. I guess life has just kind of kept rolling, right? And I've just continued on with it. And I never thought that I'd be working back. Well, I never thought I'd be working in China, and working back with the UFC in a coaching role has certainly been a great experience. Yeah, I mean, it's been a big turnaround from, finishing my fighting career, losing motivation in being an athlete, and then finding that motivation again in being a coach. And then there's moments where, you think in your head, should I do something else or should I do this? But, really when you take a moment and think about, well, I take a moment and think about what I'm doing, it's pretty unique, and it's very enjoyable. It's a great job. It's a great working environment in the P.I. I mean, we go there and we're dropping all sorts of bad words daily, but yeah, no, we're having a great time, and it's a really positive, place where you can pitch an opinion or have a discussion or a debate about something and get somewhere positive, without hurting anyone's feelings, which is great. So for myself, I want to be involved in coaching for the foreseeable future, and even when I'm an old man, it's probably the same to you. Like, I want to just be involved in coaching to some degree, and it doesn't have to be high level, but I want to be involved and around it for the rest of my life. Whether I take breaks on and off, moving forward or not, I still want to be involved in it, and hopefully I can still walk and talk all right when I'm 50 or 60. If I keep sparring with the P.I. athletes, I probably won't be able to walk and talk. My goal would be to have a Chinese UFC champion who's stepped foot in our facility and we've trained. And that could be a longer way off, but that would be 2 to 3 year goal for me. Would be like that someone that's come into my presence and worked with me and our team has gone on to win a belt. And I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be with me there coaching the whole period of their time, but I want to have someone, I want to see the fruition of that facility, because I think in China there is great athletes, but there's actually people who've been top contenders, maybe more than top contenders, and who are from Chinese that have never hit MMA pads in their life, who have never had an MMA coach in their life. I'm being 100% legit when I say this. It's really an untapped resource. And I think we're trying to tap in not only to, that side of it where they don't have coaches who hold MMA pads or MMA coaches in general. It's just tapping into the actual social fabric there of the mindset of how they think as athletes and how they make decisions. We have to get in early, right? And that's why I think some of the younger athletes will be like the 2.0 of these guys, So we're trying to get in there and just, there's a lot of layers in China, right? And them being athletes and being tough here, that's not the problem. It's everything else, right? It's educating. And one thing I'd like to do is just go around and just upskill the coaches around China, And when I say upskill, again, we're not showing them techniques that don't exist. It's just this is how we structure a fight camp. This is how we would train in off camp versus fight camp, and this is the focus. And it's the stuff that we've been doing for years, but a lot of people don't know around the world. And I think they're the important things. It's the big picture things, the little nuanced details and the one-on-one work, that's down the line, that's high end. If you saw in that journal, Dean has a little pyramid of, representing obviously the bottom spending more time and the top less time, as you're a beginner, and you'd be at the top of this pyramid would be game plan, and the second one would be fakes, feints, traps, etc. But as you get more experienced, it's inverted. The majority of your time is spent on that game planning, and then the next amount of your time is the traps, fakes, and feints, and the lowest down that chain of time, what you're doing is learning new techniques. It's that's done already. It's all that other nuanced stuff, and then your training can adapt and change. So I think just getting people on board with the best practice of what to do. And it is a bit unknown, right? MMA is not a sport that's been around and documented and like football or other sports that have been for years. So that's where we're at. We're in those infancy in terms of we are at the forefront of collecting the data, putting it out there for people to look at, and then trying to create best practices on everything, and throwing a lot of stuff at the wall as well and seeing what sticks. And I think at the end of it, everyone will be better off.
Beautiful, mate. Beautiful. I think, it is exciting that you are yeah, definitely at the forefront. Jokes aside, it's pretty amazing stuff that you are putting out, and yeah, what a living the dream situation you've got at the moment, mate. So if people want to get in touch with you, maybe chase you up and get that kale shakes and coffee enema ebook that you're putting out, how do they do that?
They can, you can hit me up. Probably Instagram is the one social media that I do use. It's Rich UFC, RICH UFC is my Instagram handle. If you want to check it out, shoot me a message and I'll get back to you. Or write me a review and saying how much you hated this podcast or you liked it. I think I like it, mate. It's a lot of fascinating information, really, of just like. I mean, I've spoken a lot of general terms, right, about everything, but I think going into detail would just be lost in translation, because I think if that makes sense. Especially with the journal stuff and the mental preparedness, that is all pretty new. I mean, the techniques aren't new, but the ideas are pretty new, right? And like I said, with a lot of things, it's what we do is for the most part pretty basic, but just the programming and the methodology around it is pretty structured.
Beautiful. And it's well worth a read, those journals, for anyone, because and they're big too. It's like 400 something pages with a lot of photos in there too. I felt like it's kind of like an old school essay where you pad it out a little bit. Looks nice. Look nice on the coffee table though.
For sure, yeah. I'm looking forward to getting a few hard copies. Thanks for having me on,
mate. My pleasure, and hopefully do it again sometime again in the future.
For sure.
Thanks, mate.
You have been listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Until next time, you can visit sonnybrown.net to find out more ways to break it down.